Hi, I'm Bob Giroux. I'm the Executive Director of Parent to Parent Network in Norfolk. Today we're going to try something a little bit different in terms of training. You're going to see a kind of a rough video. I hope you'll look at the content rather than the bells and whistles.
And I'm Tonda Craner, and I'm a family advocate at Parent to Parent.
Today I want to talk about an acronym that I think helps folks to remember some real critical qualities that an advocate should have, and not only have, but use in their day-to-day work with other clients. Boy, I'm sure not here to suggest for a moment that something I'm going to say today is new to you. It may be just a reminder, and I hope that it's a useful reminder. What we really mean about this is that having supervised different kinds of professionals for a lot of years, what I've seen is that when people, especially when they're new in this or any other field, they kind of have that tendency to want to be like others that they see. They don't have confidence in their own abilities, and so they kind of pretend like they're somebody else, you know? I mean, not really, but they don't trust in their own judgment. My own sense is, my own belief is that you've got to be real, that you have to be you, whatever that means. We all grow as professionals, so in the beginning, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I'm new at this. If there's something that I overlook in working with you as the client, I will sure pick it up and make sure that I get it corrected the next time. And if you have any questions or things I haven't covered, you know, that kind of thing. We need to be real with people and not pretend to be more or less than we are. I don't know how you feel about it, Tonda, but one of the real turnoffs, I think, for clients is when we can be too humble and give
They want to have confidence in that we can be helpful.
Right, right.
It's nice that we're peers and we have children and maybe we've seen some of what they're going through, but we have to give them confidence in us, but not overconfidence.
So finding that balance is really an art, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it really does take a certain amount of reflection on what we do. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So what we're going to do now is a role play situation where we're going to try to do it the wrong way, and then we'll try to do it the right way in terms of authenticity. Hi, Tonda. This is our second time that we've met together. How you been doing since we were last together?
There's good days and bad days.
I see. I see. Well, you know, I kind of have those too. I remember a college professor I had, and one said that you know, the bad days are the ones that teach us, you know, that the good days are to be more appreciated. And in fact, when I was working on my master's degree, and I learned from one of the teachers at the University of Chicago. You probably don't know him, but he was a real well-known person in the field, and kind of gives me a little edge in terms of my knowledge on working with family members and whatnot. My family, you know, we used to talk a lot about these kinds of problems, but I found that, you know, it really isn't that tough over a period of time to solve these problems, right?
I would disagree completely.
What else would you think of now as we were talking about that issue? What else might you do in that situation?
As the advocate?
Yeah.
It's very, just that they know that you're going to be there for them, that usually takes away a lot of the anxiety to explain to them the process, like literally. You go to the window and check in. We wait to be called. We go in, where to sit, things like that.
Excellent.
Although, just because so many of them have never been in a courtroom with their child, to know potentially the good and the bad, what might happen if they go or if they're sent home, or even if they're just kept in the juvenile detention center.
Okay.
Just to know the options so that they're not surprised when something unexpected happens.
That really sounds like a good tool in your arsenal. That's very good. Okay. Let's move on and let's talk about the next part of ACORN, which is congruence. to be congruent, which is nothing more congruency is nothing more than a 50-cent word of saying that you do what you say you're going to do, that you don't talk one way and you act another, that what you say is what you're going to do. So again, we're going to try to role play doing it wrong, and then we'll see if we can't come up with an idea of doing it a little better, okay? Tonda, this is our third visit, and you went to court last week, and we went to court, and the outcome was pretty good. How are you feeling about that?
I was really glad that she got to come home.
Yeah, I hear that. You know, I was supposed to get you some information about a different counselor, because I know you said you didn't much care for that counselor, but I really didn't have time to do that. You know, I'll try to do that this week, okay?
But then it takes a couple weeks to get in, and we have to go back to court in a month.
Mm-hmm.
And what if we don't even have one scheduled visit under our belts? You said you would.
Yeah, I know it. But, you know, I'm very busy, and I work with a lot of people, so it was just one of those things that was unavoidable. I'm just kind of wondering how things have been going for you since our last contact.
Well, there are good days and then there are bad days.
Oh, I hear you. Tell me what's going on.
Well, we're still having trouble with Hannah at school, and the probation officer isn't pleased with her behavior. We have to go to court again. Can you come?
I sure can. It, of course, is always, as I mentioned the first time, it'll depend on if there's somebody else that's scheduled during that time. Do you know when the court date is?
It's next Thursday at 2 in the afternoon at Madison County.
I'll tell you what I will do. When we finish today, I'll check on my schedule and make sure that that's penciled in. And if it isn't available, I'll let you know right away, okay? That'll take a phone call to my office to be able to do it.
Okay. The judge said if we come back again, though, that he wasn't going to let her go home. And now we have to go back again. And what if they keep her?
That's pretty scary, isn't it?
It's very scary.
You know, I don't have the answer to what it'll be like. Here's what I know for sure, honest to God. Sometimes the fear of the unknown is the worst of the damn things we have to face.
Well, you hear all kinds of stories about what those kids learn when they're in there. And
I know
it seems like they get worse once they spend a weekend there instead of better.
I hear you. Let's talk about what some possible options are. You know, you can kind of prepare and do everything you can to get ready for this meeting so that the judge doesn't do that. With the promise that I can't promise anything. I don't know for sure. I'm just thinking if you get all your ducks in a row, that's what you can do about this. And then you'll have to kind of let go, right? And the judge will do what he does. But I'm also thinking if you don't get prepared, the judge is going to think she doesn't care.
And I do.
I know you do. Like I mentioned, you know, the first time we met, I'd been in the exact same situation. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this, is that I know judges are different people, you know. What I mean is they're not all the same. But my experience was that if the judge thought that we were trying, it made a big difference in whether or not we were going to, you know, place the child or not. Okay?
So what are some things I could, do so that he knows I'm caring, that I care and I'm being proactive and not just letting it happen?
That's an absolute excellent question. I know what those answers are for me, and I'll make some suggestions, but I want you to think about what stuff you can come up with. What ideas come to your mind that you could do to be able to be proactive? Anything cross your mind yet?
Well, you said that we probably should see a counselor, and I just haven't got around to it yet, and we're just so busy, and she misbehaves so, and it's so far away for us to travel to go see a counselor. But do you think the judge would be pleased if there was an appointment to see a counselor?
What do you think?
I think so.
Okay. I have the sense that I kind of agree. Again, I can't be sure. But again, I'm going to come at you this way and say, if you don't do the appointment, I know that won't impress him at all. Okay?
Sure.
So it's a risk, but it's worth taking. Okay, so why don't we take a minute and let's schedule a time to contact that counselor, okay?
Okay.
Last time we talked about how anxious you were, and, understandably so, about having to go to court again. I think it turned out pretty well. What do you think?
I was very grateful that she came home.
Okay. You know, we talked at the end of the court session about how you weren't very comfortable with the counselor that you were working with, and you asked me if I would get you the names of some other counselors. And I brought those here today, so why don't we spend a few minutes talking about them and then see if we can schedule another appointment, okay?
Wonderful. I think she'd really work better with a woman instead of a man.
Ah, okay.
So can we start with that?
Absolutely. Remember, you're in charge here. This is what family-centered practice. You're the person who's in charge here.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's the end of that. Let's talk now about compassion. How do you think it's going so far? I don't know of too many words in the English language that, at least from my experience, are more misunderstood than the word compassion. Everybody seems to think of something different, you know what I mean, when they're talking about compassion. There are those folks for whom compassion is almost like a sign of weakness. You know, tell it like it is, even if it hurts their feelings, you know. And then there are those that seem to, you know, they go from empathy to sympathy very quickly. They're feeling sorry for people.
And I think we can, as advocates, we can go way too far. We want to be compassionate, absolutely. But they don't need us to sit and cry with them and be weak, perhaps. They need us to be strong but compassionate.
What do you see as kind of the downfall of too much sympathy?
We end up doing too much for them, and we don't help them become strong. We just enable their weakness.
Well said. Well said. I remember that old saying, you know, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Teach him to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. And that really does apply in this case.
And sometimes we just find it's easier, I'll do it just because it's simpler, than to explain all the details to you, but we're doing them a disservice. We have to teach them. It could be something as simple as how to find the correct spot in the phone book to choose a counselor or something like that. And I have a list, so I'll just do it for you. I'll make that phone call for you. That doesn't help them. It might in an emergency situation, but mostly we need to teach them how to help themselves.
What I've noticed, and tell me if you have or not, that sometimes too, if you do too much for folks, they lose respect for you. It's like maybe a feeling, I don't know, that they can get whatever they want from you, or that you're a vending machine.
Right, that I'm not a professional, I'm just like a servant or something.
Yeah.
You know, a simple phone call they could make, because they have me on their cell phone, they'll call me and ask me to make that simple phone call. I had that happen this morning.
Okay. Okay. And kind of how did you respond then?
Well, he was on the road, and he was like, will you call so-and-so for me, which is another worker who provides service for him, and give her this message. And my first instinct was, sure, that's no problem. I'll call her. I'm on the road. I'm going out of town. But then I had to say, you know what? He didn't have her number with him. I will find that number for you. I will give you the number you need to make the phone call.
Outstanding. Outstanding. If it worked for us to do everything for everybody, well, do it then, right? It just doesn't work.
And that one worked because she called me later and said that he had called. So it was successful.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Let's talk about the next one, compassion. Excuse me, we already talked about compassion, didn't we?
We did, just now.
Let me say this before you switch, Cliff. Let me say this also about compassion. Again, this is meant for food for thought. In the alcohol drug field especially, one of the tactics that many, many, many of our clients used to have was the ability to be able to manipulate others, to con their way out of problems, to find a way to blame their wife or their husband for whatever their problems were. And then that way it keeps them defended and they don't have to change. It's, after all, your fault. So sympathy can really buy into that whole process of poor me. And the way we used to say it is poor me, poor me, pour me another drink. We used to say also that sympathy is between shit and suicide in the dictionary. That's how absolutely useless that it is. Makes sense to you?
It sounds a little harsh,
But it's true, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about being open and what that means.
I think that being open is a two-way street. We need to be open and honest with them, but they really need to be open and honest with the advocate. I find that's one of my hardest things, is because I'll find myself in a situation that they weren't honest with me, they weren't open with me. I only got half the story, and then I'm either embarrassed or look foolish, or I'm unable to help them.
Mhm, mhm.
So they need to remember that that's a two-way street.
If it happens that way, that the person isn't honest with you, what would you do about that? I know sometimes for folks there's a temptation to kind of, well, we'll just avoid it and let it go this time.
You have to confront them. You need to do it gently and with compassion, but you have to do it, or number one, it'll continue. But it can also come back and bite you. I had this recently, and I had to tell the person, I feel that you're not telling me everything I need to know. And I felt in the court appearance that I felt foolish because of the things you didn't tell me. And as a result, she said she didn't want to work with me anymore.
And I see all the elements of authenticity, congruence, and compassion in what you just said. I've never seen that it was terribly compassionate to allow people to continue to do the stuff that didn't work for them in the first place. And if lying and manipulating has been part of the repertoire, and part of the act, part of the way of doing life's business,
And
it probably hasn't worked for them.
Well,
very
it's
well.
getting them through life, but it's not making for a healthy person.
It wouldn't be in the current circumstances, at least some of them, if those elements hadn't been there and been present to a certain degree. We say in the field that the answer when clients ask us, how do I change? The answer is how. H-O-W. You need to be honest. You need to be open to new experiences, new knowledge, new people, and you need to be willing to try things that you might not have ever tried before. It might be something as simple as going to a parenting class, or it might be something far more complicated, going into some sort of social situation that they're, really uncomfortable with, or the willingness to try to do something different in the parenting of their child. Because it's one thing, isn't it, to learn something in a parenting class, but it's quite another to actually go
Put
on
it into action,
and put it
yes.
into action.
And when you're open and honest and willing, it's hard work. We need to let them know that this isn't going to just happen to you. You're going to have to work to improve your situation.
Okay. Let's see if we can find a couple of examples of maybe the right way and the wrong way to do this then. Okay. Todd, I'm wondering how things went at the court the other day for you.
Well, she's home.
She's home? Okay. And were you able to tell the judge about some of the problems that she's had here at home?
I told most of them, but if I'd been completely honest, he'd have taken her, off to Boys Town or Geneva or something.
I see. Do you think there's any chance that if the judge finds that out, that he might be a little ticked or even take action?
Are you going to tell?
I'm sure not going to tell. Remember, what we talk about is private and confidential. Except for, remember, that child abuse and child neglect stuff and all that? No, I'm not going to tell. But the caseworker was also present. And the caseworker heard what you said. And I need you to know, okay, that the caseworker came up to me and said, I think she's lying.
What did you say?
I said, you need to talk to Tonda about that.
I didn't lie. I just didn't tell everything. I don't want to get her in more trouble.
Yeah, I understand that. But I'm wondering if the caseworker, and let me tell you the rest of what the caseworker said, that she's going to pass that information on to the judge and she's going to ask for another hearing. And I think there's a pretty good chance that she's going to get it. And what I'm saying to you is that I know how much you care about your child, and I know how scary it is to tell things as they are. But remember, we had talked about that if you don't tell the judge and he thinks you're lying to you, you lose all credibility and he won't trust anything that you're saying. I think you need to contact the caseworker and have a conversation with her, and I will be with you all the way to support you in that. What do you think? It's your call. And that's where we'll leave it, okay?
As a parent, I don't know what I would do.
This should give folks a chance to have something to chew on, because it really is not a clear black and white issue at all. My point is this, hopefully that I was honest with you about that conversation with, that's all I was trying to do. Okay, yeah, what do you do in that situation? And I wasn't planning for it to end up being a kind of an open-ended thing, but it's great that it ended up that way, so, okay. Let's talk about respect and what that means. But do you know when we started?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay. Tonda, when I think about respect in this context, I think about having respect for our clients and their families. I think about having respect for ourselves. I think about having respect for the authority figures that we have to deal with. You might remember when you first came here that I asked you to sign a big, long-winded ethical statement about stuff. What's your sense of why that's done? And what has that got to do with respect? Any thoughts on that?
When I signed it, I thought your expectations were that I would be a professional and that you could trust me to respect the job that I was given.
Let's say, long time ago, I had a person who worked for me, and we have a rule about not accepting gifts from our clients. It changes the nature of the relationship. And if we start to become friends, quote unquote, with our clients, that makes us paid friends.
Absolutely.
And that's a really yucky feeling in my stomach, and I wonder how our clients would feel about it once they figure that out. That hopefully we bring some skills and some expertise to the table that makes us good professionals while still being peers.
Mm-hmm.
And the peer is what makes us especially good, right? The peer aspect. This person came into me the day after I trained the staff on not accepting gifts and tried to explain why we have a policy about it. Some agencies will allow a gift up to so many dollars and so forth, and it's really different with different organizations. But the key element to me is to not cross those boundaries from the kind of relationship we should have into a, quote, friendship relationship where the client begins to misunderstand the nature of the relationship. If they think you're your friend, they're your friend, and you're their friend, and you're not spending time with them, they're going to be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And you lose the ability to help them, I think. This staff person came in and said, here, let me show you what my client gave to me last night. My clients want to be able to give me gifts, she said.
Totally inappropriate.
Why? Why do you think it's totally inappropriate?
First of all, she was told not to.
Yeah.
Second of all, just what you said, those people expect more out of you, and they've changed the dynamics of the relationship. I had one just recently, and it was after court, and court had gone long, and we were all starving, and we really needed to have a family team meeting, so they asked if I would come eat lunch with them, and it was at a restaurant where we could have privacy and speak, and they really wanted to buy me lunch, and I kept saying, thank you, no, but I'll buy my own lunch, and they were fairly insistent because they really appreciated all I had done for them. And I had to finally, say to that, I really appreciate it, and that's very kind of you. But it's just the policy that, I need to buy my own lunch. And don't worry, because the company will reimburse me.
I've even in situations like that bought the lunch just to kind of end the dynamic. I don't even know if that's the right choice when I think about it after the fact.
You don't want to hurt their feelings.
Right. But I really respect the fact that you respected that policy. What that does is creates a trust between us. Because ultimately, the only tools that parent-to-parent has are the advocates. We don't have any inventory that we sell or anything like that. The tools that we have to get the job done are you and the other advocates. And if those tools aren't sharp, or if they're not reliable, start to think, do I need to get a new tool?
Sure.
Do I need to, sharpen that tool, whatever the case may be? And my experience was with this other person that I just mentioned, that she not only disrespected that rule, but lots of other rules. It was nothing more than the tip of the iceberg. And it became difficult then to know how she was representing parent-to-parent out in the community.
You couldn't trust her.
Couldn't trust her. And then I started to thinking, my goodness, does she behave this way with clients also? And it raises so many questions. Part of the reason that we have ethical boundaries in place is not to have some, fancy set of rules to impress other people. It's to protect our clients and to protect you.
Sure.
The last thing you want to do, right, is to send a signal to a male client that you're willing to have more than a relationship. So by setting that clear boundary right up front, there will not be any business dealings, there will not be a love relationship, there will not be a sex. You at least have done everything you can at that moment to be able to protect yourself and, of course, protect the client.
And when you accept things like a lunch, then they feel more free to call you on the weekends and interrupt your personal time, and then you feel like a little more obligated to accept that phone call or go the extra mile that I may not do for another client, for that person.
So it really raises a lot of issues about boundaries, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's a conversation that personally I think we as professionals need to kind of have as an ongoing discussion. The problem is that those conversations are held in-house, in other words, within the organization, and so we hear the same thing over and over again, and it really doesn't challenge our thinking after a while. So I think sometimes that we need to have those conversations with peers outside the agency.
That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have much means to be able to do that, what with caseloads and funding levels where they are and so forth. But hopefully in time, there'll be more opportunity for that. Let's talk just a little bit more about respect in terms of what it means to respect our clients and what it means for them to respect us. The first thing that crosses my mind when I think about respecting our clients is, you think about respecting the differences in clients, racial and ethical, or not ethical, ethnic differences, and not try to force everybody into the same mold, right? But it goes beyond that, doesn't it? There's another element of respect for clients regardless of background, and I wonder what your thoughts are about how do you generate a sense of respect for clients?
When you said it, it made me think that you need to set aside anything that I might have thought, any biases or
oh, I hear that. That's hard.
What I typically might have thought about. I'm from Indiana, and so I've had very little dealings with Native Americans, and so you might have a stereotype in your mind, and you need to completely set that aside. Or someone with a mental health issue. Something as simple as words that you might have said previously, like someone's crazy. Well, if you're in the mental health field, that's not a funny word that you throw around.
It's also judgmental, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think we have to respect preconceived notions, stereotypes, set them aside, see every single client and family as an individual. we can even get biases when we look at, say, a navigator referral comes in, just what other people have written down, and they have such a tiny snapshot of that person on as a phone call or as a caseworker. I need to have an idea of what their problem is, but I need to go in there absolutely open-minded and give them a chance to let me see the real them.
There's that openness again, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Very good, very good. Sometimes, you know, my sense is maybe we shouldn't read all the reports before we go in because it might bias, but sometimes that's problematic too. I've worked on 2 different reservations in South Dakota, the Cheyenne River, which is up in the northwestern part, beautiful country, but I mean, it is sometimes very, very open. And Missouri River bends 1,000 different ways, and it's just beautiful. And then the Yankton Sioux Reservation, which is down by Yankton, it's west of Yankton. I've had pretty good luck with Native Americans, and I believe personally that the biggest reason is authenticity. When people would ask me, do you understand this or that or the other thing about Native Americans, I'd say, no, I don't have any experience in that. Can you tell me what that means? And I asked a lot of questions. One of the things I learned, just as an example, from Herb Grandbois, a social worker on the Cheyenne River Reservation. I was at his home one time, and it was more of a social kind of a thing, and I was admiring this beautiful painting of Geronimo. I mean, it was gorgeous. I have a hunch this thing, you know, wasn't bought at Walmart. And I was saying, man, this is really cool. And he kind of laughed and he chuckled in his inimitable way. And he said, Bob, he says, don't admire it too much because it is the Sioux custom, at least in his band, that if a peer admires something too much, you give it to them lest there be envy.
Oh.
So I said, that's the ugliest damn thing I've ever seen. And we laughed together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there anything else you can think of in terms of respect before we move on?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. It's a conversation again that we could have forever again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about nobility, or to be noble. That's a word, Tonda, that is not used very often. We don't talk about being noble. There's a lot of negative connotations with it. But I think it has some usefulness, at least it does for me, in the sense that it helps me to remember who I'm there when I'm visiting with a client, who I'm there for. It is selfish to be there for our own means.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to my clients and I talk about my problems for the purpose of talking about my problems, whose needs are getting met?
Absolutely. And there's a fine line. We want them to know that we understand what they're going through, we've experienced. We want them to have a sense of that, but never ever that I want you to hear my problems and monopolize the conversation in the meeting.
I think a good rule of thumb when it comes to using our own experiences is to limit it only to the point where it will add knowledge to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That way we know that we're at least trying to meet the needs of the client and not therefore our own needs. And again, a reminder that when we start breaking those boundaries, like doing business with clients and so forth, again, you have to ask the question, whose needs are getting met here?
Right.
Another aspect of nobility that I think about is the willingness to be gracious under fire, to do things that we maybe don't necessarily think we ought to do. An example of that is, how can I word this? We might staff a case, and I may say to you, I think you need to report this case to Child Protection Services because of thus and so. You might disagree. Ultimately, I say it does need to be done. Not something you want to do. You have some concerns maybe about how this will impact your relationship. But you also, after we discuss it, maybe have at least some sense that, yeah, there might really be some risk here. The noble thing is to try to do what we can to err on the side of protection. It would protect you and your relationship and your ability to work with them to not report, but whose needs would be met.
And sometimes you feel traitorous,
Right.
even though you know in your heart it's what's best. And it may be something as simple as I need to call their caseworker at DHHS and just inform them. You always have this sense of, not that I want them to like me, but I don't want to break that trust. And so sometimes it's hard to say, I'm going to have to call your caseworker, or I'm going to have to call the school and report that, or your an attorney, or whatever, because you really don't want to break trust with them, but you have to be noble and ultimately do what's right and best.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think you've had this experience. One of the things that I used to do, and it happened quite often, is people might tell me things right in my office. Again, a little bit different situation because of the type of work that I did, but quite often it would be in my office. And I would say, I need to remind you that I'm required by law to report suspected child abuse and neglect. And in some way or another, I would say, I think this is something that has to be reported. I want you to understand that I'd rather do, anything in the world but this, but it's my job, and I always have to err, as I've told you 100 times, on the side of protecting those children. So I'm going to call social services. I want you to be right here and hear what they're saying. And I want you to tell them that I'm reporting. No secrets. I'm not going to do something behind your back. That kind of thing. Sometimes, and didn't you have an experience like that where then you continued to work with a client, or was that one of our other advocates?
I think that was someone else.
Okay.
But, and that's difficult too, because if you call, say, the police or the hotline or something, they'll say to you, we had that this week where one of our advocates had to report a case of suspected sexual abuse, and they said, do not tell the family you've called us. Where's, that's that fine line.
Here is my first sense in nobility is that I've already made a contract with that client. And it's okay to use those words. We have a commitment, or we have a client. We have some sort of agreement, however you like to say that I'm there to act in their interest. Unless I had reason to believe that the child would be at risk because I told the client, I would tell the client. I would not agree with social services that I'll not. And I've done it. I've been in that situation, and I've had them pissed off at me.
So as long as we make it clear to social services, I respect what you're saying, but I cannot abide with that.
Absolutely not.
Because I'm their advocate. That's why I work with them.
That's the way I see it. Now, this might be food for discussion for folks out there, but that's the way I see it, and apparently that's the way that we operate. Do you happen to know in that situation that we were just talking about, the other advocate, are they continuing to work with the family?
Yes.
Good, okay. So it can be done.
Yes.
It really can be done. It's sometimes hurtful, and you have to process that, but as we've talked 1,000 times, the basic ingredient that helps people is the relationship between you and me. There's research that confirms that in the helping profession. It doesn't matter, for example, in the counseling profession, what theory base you use. Now, there's some claims that cognitive behavioral therapy is a little bit more effective than some of the others. But essentially, the original research says it doesn't matter what theory you use. What matters, what's therapeutic, what's healing, is the relationship between the therapist and the client, between the helper and the client. So if we've been working all along at building that trust relationship, we haven't violated the boundaries, we've been authentic, we've been congruent, we've told it like it was, we've been there for them without allowing them to use us, blah, 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 all that hard stuff, and we've done the best that we can. We've, in my opinion, given that person an opportunity to make the changes that they want to make. It's now up to them. And how they choose to respond is beyond our control. We've talked, in staff about some of the frustrations that one of our advocates has because he can't help a particular person. Ultimately, a part of nobility is kind of knowing the serenity prayer, knowing the difference between what I can change, what I can't, and and learning better and better day by day the difference between the two. And if I cannot change it, I must accept it. So there must be times when you have to say that to a client, that this is something you'll need to accept, right?
Yes, or we can't fix that. That's just how it is. Sometimes life sucks.
Yes, sometimes it does. What are you going to do about it? And the trick there is always not to get in that mode of, I'll fix it for you because I know you're in pain, but how can I help you to fix it, right?
Right, or help you walk through it, through that pain.
I used to say to my clients, I don't know why I think of this now, but it might be relevant, that the best way through pain is to go through it. There is really, when you think about it, there's no way around. I had a client who had been divorced for something like 5 years, basically had been in denial and drunk during that period of time. It was as though when he sobered up, like that divorce had happened yesterday. And so starts panicking and thinking, and what am I going to do, and how, I shouldn't be feeling this after this period of time. You've never dealt with it. And as a result of that, it's still with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that you're going to have to deal with it is just like everybody else. You're going to have to go through this pain. And we'll try to help you to do that. And who else can help you to deal with that? Have you run across that with clients that sometimes they'll say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this anymore. I talked about this a dozen times. Or I talked with my counselor. I don't know why I still feel so bad.
They feel guilty because they can't get over it.
Right.
You're not getting over it because you're not dealing with it. And that's the kind of client they skip from counselor to counselor. They're just trying any program, any book, anything, and they're not really, like what you said, but a wise person once said to me, sometimes you just have to stand still and let it hurt.
Yes. And on that note, we're going to let you stand still and hurt. We hope that we've given you some food for thought. That was our only goal today. We claim no greater level of expertise than what you have. Next time it's your turn. We were just talking about honesty. What were you thinking?
Sometimes our families don't want us to be honest with them or force them to be honest.
Say more.
They just come to us hurting and they want us to make it better. They want us to fix the problem. They may not even want to be able to slap a Band-Aid. That's often they've always just slapped a Band-Aid on it, and sometimes we have to be honest with them and pull that scab off so that we can let it heal from within.
Boy, I couldn't agree. Well, and that's an excellent point. How many times have you met clients who come to you and say, I was driving down the road and I had this great epiphany. I realized that I'm not a very good parent, that I need to make some changes in my parenting skills and how I go about living my life. And so I've decided to seek out services with you.
I don't remember that ever happening.
I would look at them like, are you on medication, right?
If someone came to me, it would be because, well, the judge says that I'm not a very good parent or whatever.
It's so consistent with the CD field, too. We talk about a nudge from the judge. Most of the time, people come to us, they're drug kicking and screaming. They'd rather be anyplace else. People don't want to do the work. They want the pain to go away.
And they don't come to us until they're in crisis, usually.
Yep.
If we can get people to understand, if you'll come to us at the beginning, oh, we can mitigate so much.
It'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? I don't know. We're kind of fighting human nature in a sense there. Because I'd rather go about my life. How many times have you said, I've got a couple hours, it's a beautiful day. I think I'll go have a counseling session. If it's I want to be doing anything else but working with a professional, right?
Right. I just heard on the news this morning, they said that they were talking about marriage counseling. They said couples have usually been in trouble for 6 years before they seek counseling.
Do you know my experience? I did marriage counseling only for a year as part of the work I did at Lutheran Social Services in Sioux Falls. I think I've mentioned that to you before. My experience was, and this was taught to me by a much more experienced counselor than I was, that most marriage counseling is actually divorce counseling.
They said that.
Is that right?
They said that it's usually, by then, it's often to help you work through your divorce.
It's one of the reasons why states don't pay for marriage counseling very much anymore. Insurance companies won't pay for marriage counseling. Now, I don't know, maybe there are some that still do, but most of the ones that, when I was with Lewis and Clark, would not pay for it.
I got the impression from our clinician that like the EAP,
Mhm.
like you can have, I think she said 6. So they might get you started and your insurance might pay for it, but.
But you're on your own
Right.
after that. And that isn't even insurance paying for it, I don't think that's the company paying for it with that EAP.
Mm.
I don't know, usually that's the case, and then your insurance kicks in. Yeah, isn't that interesting? People don't come to us, and that's maybe something, we were talking before about acceptance, that's maybe something we have to accept about our clients,
Mhm.
is that they're there because of problems. And if you're feeling like you're getting drugged down, you kind of have an ethical responsibility to recognize and do something about it, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, it'll bring you down into the mud. What do they call that? Burnout.
But for sure.
Burnout. In my experience, burnout is perceived by many, many helpers as a judgmental word. You haven't managed your life well enough to where you've been able to avoid burnout, is what they hear.
Mhm.
What burnout really is too much stress. And I don't know if you're aware, but the word stress originates out of architecture, right? Are you aware
I
of that?
did not know that. My brother's an architect.
What that was a determination, how much stress can a steel beam take before it snaps,
Sure.
okay? So that was adapted over time to, how much can I take? One of the examples I used to use with my clients is to kind of show that you have to do something about problems, or they're simply going to build, is I would say, could you hold this for me? Thank you, and just hang on to it. Could you hold this for me, please? Would you hold this for me? Could you hold this for me also?
I really can't.
That's too much. And it's just a way of visually illustrating that, doesn't matter who you are, sometimes too much is too much. It's not a reflection of weakness or, a sign of weakness or anything like that. It means that there is not a human being alive who doesn't need help. And the insanity we talk about of alcoholism, in part, is the unwillingness to seek help. Now, some people don't like that term, and I understand that. But one of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous says, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Maybe you believe that's therapy, maybe you believe that's AA, maybe you believe that's friends and a sponsor helping you, but can return me to thinking that is healthy, not crazy, not destructive kinds of thinking. Does that make sense? Okay. And one of those aspects is that there is a grandiosity in all of us that says, I can handle anything.
When you just did that analogy, I was thinking, it seems like in life it's kind of the other way. I'm already holding the chair. I can juggle the big thing. And then you're giving me the little things, and that's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Amen to that. Because we all are carrying things around, you're right.
Well, and with my own children, I find when I finally snap at them, it's something small and silly and kind of bewilders them, like, what, really? And I can look back and realize, well, it's, all these things we're building.
Oh, I hear that. That makes sense. That gives reason then when a client responds in a certain way that you maybe didn't expect, to say, hey, let's stop and let's kind of talk about what's going on. What are you feeling right now, or whatnot? It doesn't make us counselors as advocates. It just, like you might do in a friendship relationship.
Right.
Hey, what's going on? You seem to be kind of upset.
And just the conversation can help them realize it themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't realize how much you have on your plate.
Absolutely. One of the signs that people are working in counseling can be tears. Now, it can be a manipulative device, so you have to be careful about that. But in some situations, it's kind of getting to that raw emotion, and it can be a real positive thing. I can't tell you how many women through the years who have said, oh, I apologize, I didn't mean to cry, and I'll tell them it's the best damn thing you've done all day. It means that you're really feeling the feelings, and you don't have to carry those around.
And you often feel better afterwards.
True. How true. Thanks.
Mhm.